Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're gonna
Hold
be
on. Try that. Start it again.
yeah. Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're gonna be addressing a very interesting topic on deep water topics. My name is Frederick Green,
I'm Derek Eldridge.
and well, I don't know if you guys been paying attention to what's going on with a recent bill that has been questionable. A lot of people think that it's already passed. I'm not sure why people are saying this, but I don't think it's passed yet. But everyone has an opinion. What do you think about this SB 145 bill?
So, California State Bill 145. The reason why I wanted to address this topic was because of a lot of posts I've been seeing on Instagram. There's been a lot of spread of misinformation, and the problem with that is no one really knows what the fuck is going on. They don't take their time to read the bill. They don't take the time to educate themselves on what's actually going on. And what happens with that is then people start operating out of fear. And when you operate out of fear, bad things come out of that. You want to be operating in the light and with knowledge, so you can have, productive conversations and come to a middle ground. I mean, this is why California has their state gas tax now, is because everybody went to the voting booth and they voted no on the gas tax. And if they took the time to read the bill that was in question, voting no meant voting yes. And before we even get into this topic as well, this is just us providing you the information on what the bill is. This is not us saying it's right, not us saying it's wrong. There's no political agenda into this. It's simply us putting the information out into the air and for you to form your own opinions and perspective on it. Think for yourself. I think that before we really get into it, I'm going to give a little bit of background about me, and Freddy's going to give a little bit of background about what he does. And it'll kind of put it all into perspective on why this topic means a lot to us. So, when I was 5 years old, I was molested by my older brother. He was 16 years old. This wasn't a one-time occurrence. This happened over a year until I figured out that it wasn't a game, that there was something going on with it. And then that's when I came out to my mother and I told her what was happening, and family broke up from that. And, it kind of got swept under the rug. And I'm really just dealing with the issues now, 30, 28 years later, going to therapy and figuring out just all the trauma and all the repercussions that had with the rest of my life. So us touching on this topic, this is something that holds close to my heart. This is something that means a lot to me, and coming out and speaking on this to be able to educate the public and educate, our viewers on what is actually happening in the world and what's happening in our state of California.
Yeah, I just like to say, and if you guys watched our intro, he addressed it a little bit. He shared a little bit of his story, and it takes a strong man to actually be able to openly, first off, admit to being a victim, and then being able to share his story, because there's a lot of people out there that have been victimized and have never been given a platform to actually address it. And then there's also that stigma that only females are sexually assaulted. There's so many people that have been silenced from either being victimized by a family member or a close relative and never being able to really address it, So for you to come out in our second episode and be brave enough to talk about it, and then it tying in with the state of our union right now in California with this bill, I just have to say, man, that's why you're my brother. I'm proud of you, man. Proud of you. There's nobody else that I would want to sit next to talking about this, because it does personally affect you. But if you don't mind, I just like to slide in and give a little bit about my knowledge in this topic. First and foremost, the bill is called SB 145. And the reason it's called SB 145 is because it's for San Bernardino specific. There's been a lot of individuals complaining about the high increase in homelessness and the impact that the population and community of San Bernardino is having based off of the large sexual offender population. I had the opportunity to be CASM certified. I am a sexual offense treatment specialist. I've been certified through the state of California to do individual therapy and group therapy with mandated sex offenders. So individuals that are currently on parole, trying to finish their stench and reintegrate into community. So a lot of the things that we do is rehabilitation based. So I have a personal stake in this bill because there's a lot of confusion. A lot of individuals think that the bill means that sexual offenders are going to be tried different. A lot of people think that the bill means that now predators can have sexual intercourse with minors and it's okay. And that's not what this bill is saying. A lot of individuals are using this information for alternative, agendas. And I just want to take the opportunity and be a voice of reason because first and foremost, I don't have a personal stake in this. I just like to share information, and the information that I get is straight from the parole office. And I can honestly say that this bill does not affect how sexual offenders are tried. This bill affects how sexual offenders are required to register. And a lot of people don't understand that. And a registration requirement, it means after the offender has already served their time, they've already done their treatment, they've already completed parole, and then they're getting into their registration. So we're talking 15, 20 years for some people. And there's a misconception that this bill is going to prevent people from having to, be convicted or, serve their time. And I just want to speak on it because that's not what this is.
So I think the first thing I really want to touch on with this topic, and I have the state bill actually up right behind us here. I've been seeing a lot of just posts on it, and it's talking about how now people are putting this misinformation out, how it's not going to be a felony or a convictable crime anymore if you are within the 10-year window period of age. Mm-hmm. So the state bill, it says a person convicted of a violation of subdivision section 286, section 287, or subdivision or section of 289 shall not be required to register at the time of offense. The person is not more than 10 years older than the minor, as measured from the minor's date of birth to the person's date of birth, and the conviction is only one requiring to person register. This paragraph does not preclude the court from requiring a person to register pursuant to section 290.006. Mm-hmm. So why don't you explain to the people what that 10-year window is? Because a lot of people thinking that if you're 20 and you have sex with a 10-year-old, that you're not going to be a felon or not convicted of that. Mm-hmm. So from what this is reading, it's already in the bill. It's not talking about sentencing or conviction. It is talking about registration. Mm-hmm. But I think this is what a lot of people are confused on, is that 10-year window period. So yes, if you could add some, provide some clarification on that.
And I would be honored to. First and foremost, like I said, I don't have a stance in sexual offenses. Anybody knows me will tell you that I don't condone heinous acts in any way, shape, or form. I don't live my lifestyle that way. But this isn't about our personal opinion. This is about the bills. This is about our state laws. And there's a lot of individuals that are not educated on our state laws. So let me start by addressing the 290, the code section 290.006. Every sexual offender is a registered 290, no matter what the sexual offense is, because that registration code covers every sexual offender. So, and it addresses their registration, not their sexual conviction. So a lot of individuals aren't necessarily knowledgeable about that stuff. Now, the 10-year issue or situation that they're talking about is a 10-year gap between the minor and the predator. So let's say if the minor is 13 years old and if the predator is 50, this does not apply to that predator because that predator is obviously over the 10-year gap. But let's say if this individual or the predator is 19 and the victim is 14, that's within that 10-year gap. So this individual is still going to be trialed and convicted as a sexual offender. He's still going to be given the amount of time for that crime. He's still going to have to get out and then do parole. And he's going to be given a parole sentence that's going to be coherent with his registration sentence, if that makes any sense. But prior to this bill being passed, every sexual offender were required to register for life. So if you were an offender that got an indecent exposure or you got caught peeing in public, you were required to register at the parole office on your birthday 10 days before, or it's 5 days before, 5 days after, every year for the rest of your life. And if you don't do that, that's a federal offense and it's another convictable offense. So there's a lot of individuals that had an issue with this. There's a lot of individuals that, let's say, caught a conviction at 21, 20, 19 with the consenting 16, 15, 14-year-old girl, and the parents may gotten, this is just this example because there's so many things that go on, but this is just an example to address this. That individual, this applies to that individual because let's say this individual gets convicted and trialed, he's going to get the time that he gets, and by the time he gets out, let's say this individual went in at 23 years old and now he gets out at 33, and then he has to do another 5 to 10 years of parole. And let's say this individual successfully completes that 5 to 10 years parole and has no other sexual conviction or no other sexual issues other than that conviction that he had. This individual is still required to register for the rest of their life. But now this bill makes it to where if this individual has had no other issues sexually, he will not be required, or she will not be required, to register for life. They fall under a tier system. So now this bill is only giving you a piece of the information. There's more to this bill. There's more to how they're doing it. So I just wanted to do my part because I had the opportunity of personally working with the population. And in working with the population, every situation isn't the same. So you can't treat every situation as the same. So this is actually progress because they're trying to address a population that's underserved. I feel that rehabilitation is very important because these are the individuals that are going to be out on the streets. So if we're not going to provide assistance, but we're still letting individuals out on the street, who do we blame? The offender or the people that have the ability to affect things like writing proper bills and providing proper treatment? So it's bigger than just face value. And I think it's a lot of what you said, misinformation.
Thanks you, Freddie. I have a couple quick questions that are, on the topic of that bill. So after their period of probation, and they don't have, they don't have to, depending on their sentencing and all that, they don't have to register as a sex offender, but it's still on their record
For
correct?
life.
For life,
It's a felony.
They're still a sex offender, but they just don't have to register.
They're a felon for the rest of their life. So when they go to apply for a job and they ask you, have you ever been convicted? They have to put yes, and then they have to put the conviction that they put. And 9 times out of 10, most convicted felons don't get a job. And that's another issue, not just the sexual offender population, but most individuals that have made a mistake when they were young. And like I said, I'm not condoning this. I'm just saying because this is real life. We have other individuals that have less heinous crimes and have caught in a felony. And when they go to apply for a job, they're not getting a job based off of a crime that they've already paid the time for. And they may have been young and underdeveloped mentally or emotionally. And now it makes it harder for them to live a more productive life. So that is a circle and it doesn't have any solutions.
Second question. Now, just because it says 10 years, they still have to go through an appeal process. There's still a process. This isn't just because if they fall within that, it's just granted.
So they have to complete their process. They have to complete their prison sentence. Then they have to complete their parole sentence. During their parole sentence, they have to complete, for the duration of parole, they're going through treatment. And that's where I come in. So let's say if that person was given 5 years, 10 years, or even a lifetime sentence of parole, for the duration of that individual's parole, they will be in sexual offender treatment. So this person can be in therapy for 10, 15, for the duration of their parole, whatever their parole sentencing in. And then so after the parole sentencing, they still have to register. Like it's not done. They still have to register until this bill has came about. Now this bill changes things. This bill puts individuals in categories now. Now everyone isn't not trialed the same or they're not punished the same, should I say. They're actually cleaning it up to put people in categories that they need to be placed in, because this is supposed to be rehabilitation, and
Mm-hmm.
rehabilitation is giving people the opportunity to progress in life, not holding them in a bubble and causing them to digress. For example, the reason the bill is called SB is because San Bernardino has one of the highest homeless populations. And the reason that homeless population is so high is because majority of them is your sexual offender population. And these are the people that are out. So these kind of bills affect people's livelihoods, and it's important for them to start straightening these things up.
Man, I had exactly what I was going to ask, and it kind of just slipped my mind. Um, because you're just so mesmerizing when I look into your
You
eyes.
know what?
You
I
know,
was thinking the same thing. I need me one of these, man. I'm jealous. I'm over here in all of this. I need to start coming in my
I
jammies.
told Freddie he had to bring his A game,
Hey,
today. But this is just one of many outfits that you'll see on this show. All right, we got many more to come.
no, but
Um,
on a lighter note, though, I do want to say something about this, because I know a lot of people might watch this and be like, "What is this dude talking about? Is he a confidant? Is he confiding for this population?" And I just want to say, injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And if we're gonna be in 2020 identifying the heinous acts or the problems in the world, we got to address it all. And I feel that it's my duty, working with this population and actually growing relationships with individuals that have committed sexual offenses, to actually tell their side of the story. For example, real quick, if you don't mind, I had one individual, and based off of confidentiality, I won't share the information, his personal information, but this individual was a 16-year-old man. 16-year-old man. You hear that? It's not a man, that's a boy. He was 16 years old, and he had a 13-year-old girlfriend. And at the time, his girlfriend was African American and he was Hispanic. The girlfriend's parents found out that she was involved with him, and they called the police. And he was tried as an adult. But what happened was he went to YA, which actually they have a sexual offender YA. He went to sexual offender YA until he aged out.
what's YA?
It's basically youth authority.
Okay.
It's basically juvenile detention centers.
Mm-hmm.
But they actually have juvenile detention centers for juvenile offenders, sexual offenders. So he went to the juvenile sexual offender facility until he turned 18, and then he was trialed and convicted as an adult. Um, and of course, a 13-year-old cannot consent, but 16 to 13, and this individual falls into this category. And this is why I even have the testicular fortitude to say something about this, because I had to treat this individual. And watching this individual, he was more mature than the grown people that didn't have the same circumstance, but he fell under the same umbrella. So now when he goes to try to go to school, or when he goes to try to apply for a job, it's going to be more difficult for him. And now he's a statistic. So do you trial him or treat him the same as you would someone that forcefully penetrates a minor when that individual is, let's say, over the age of 25? Does that person? No, you have to separate this. You have to make sense of it, because all of this is about funding.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's going to be funded, the least you can do is make sure that the funding is going where it needs to go.
So that's what this bill is really addressing, is not just putting everyone under this umbrella, but it's sectioning off. So, if you get indecent exposure in public for pissing behind the bar, you're not grouped in the same penalties and umbrella as someone who does have sex with a minor.
And on the flip side of that, let's say if you are an individual that has a pissing in public indecent exposure, but you have a niche for pissing in public, you got 3 pissing in public indecent exposures. Now you're not going to be in that first tier system, because what they're doing is they're creating a 3-tier system. It's like I think it's a 5-year, 10-year lifetime registry, and that's the system that they're trying to create. It was never that before. It was just everyone had lifetime registry. So let's say if you're that individual that got caught pissing in public and you did it 3 times, you're going to be probably in that second or third tier. You're not going to be in the first tier. But let's say if you pissed 1 time, this is your only offense, you have no other criminal offenses, you should be in that first tier, But
yeah. So I wanted to touch on you talked about them sexual offenders and the people being back out on the streets, and if the system doesn't do its job with rehabilitation and teaching them, who's to blame. And I believe, obviously everyone has free will.
Mm-hmm.
um, I could have very easily gone out and done the same thing
Mm-hmm.
to someone else that was done to me.
Mm-hmm.
um, After I was molested, and everything I'm about to talk about has been something that's been brought to my attention light through me going through therapy for this. But being exposed to sex at such a young age, that stunted my emotional growth, that stunted my sexual growth, that's stunted my ability to have relationships.
Yeah.
Um, and, I didn't really realize until I started going to therapy how much of effect it had on me of what I thought was okay,
Mm-hmm.
of with sex, and just going out to fill a void, and
Mm-hmm.
not realizing that I was using sex as a way to make myself feel better or feel accepted. And because I didn't go through any rehabilitation, I didn't learn about this, in my head. This was done to me by someone that was very close to me that I loved. For my whole life, I thought that you had to hurt other people in order to let them know that you love them,
Yeah.
in a way. So I think that it's very important with the whole rehabilitation process, because if you don't educate, we all make mistakes. And again, I'm not condoning anything, but if you're not properly educated on the mistakes that you made and what you did wrong and how you can fix it, aren't you just going to go back out and do the same shit again?
Especially if it's been done to you. A lot of times with the clients that had the opportunity to work, the negative behaviors was adopted by the parents. Oftentimes the parents were the offenders. So imagine the psyche of an individual growing up in a household being touched by a parent, thinking that that's normal. And then when you grow up and you think that it's okay for an adult to touch a youngster, and then you're being hit with some convictions, whereas in your father or your mother that is still living a normal life. It's all about deviancy. And they talk about it in sexual offense treatment. It's sexual deviancy. And a lot of people want to talk about what other people are doing, but everyone has sexual deviancy. So I think it's very important to not normalize um, sexual offenses. That's not normal, but it's a normal occasion in our cultures. And when I say cultures, I don't mean race, I mean time periods. From the baby boomers on to the millennials, it's a normal thing, and it's sad to say that, but I think that people need to be able to talk about it instead of trying to sweep it under the rug or act like it's not happening or allowing the police to take care of it, because it's not going to work until we start talking about it, especially excuse me, especially with everything going on with sex trafficking and the Epstein Netflix special. You have a lot of individuals being enlightened on a lot of the heinous, deviant things that are going on in the nation. So I think it's only fair if we create a platform to talk about it unbiasedly, and especially if we're going to talk about bills and laws. You have to understand the bill and the law that we're talking about, and oftentimes people don't study the bills. People don't study the laws that are being passed, and I think that's another issue that people need to really start paying attention to what your Senate is pushing up, what the legislative party is cooking up, and before you vote for it, know what no means and know what yes means instead of just doing it because celebrities are telling you to vote.
You talked about Epstein, and people just being enlightened to the sexual deviancy going on. We were talking about this bill, um, and I think a lot of the people that are posting within that 10-year law,
Mm-hmm.
what are people getting this bill confused with? We were talking about it earlier with.
I seen a few posts. I seen a few posts. Excuse my French on Facebook, and they're trying to integrate the LGBTQ population with the sexual offender population. I seen something along the lines of California is trying to make it okay for minors to be able to have sexual relationships with adults, and they're integrating that with this bill, and they're mixing and skewing things, and it's causing fear and more division. And the first thing that we said in the beginning of this is that our job is to eliminate fear and division, and we want to create unity, right? So, in order to do that, we have to be able to talk about the things that are going on. And the LGBTQ movement has nothing to do with this bill. This has everything to do with policy and what's an outdated law that has stood for a very long time, that a lot of people has been appealing, and now it's finally being some momentum and things are starting to move like everything else in the world, which we need more movement, we need more changes, we need more, you know, in my personal opinion, because now you have individuals that are more motivated, you know, to change instead of, you know, I'm just a statistic. Like, I like what you said. You said I could have just done what was done to me. And most sexual offenders are statistics. And if you would ask most individuals that have been sexually molested themselves, um, statistics show that you're supposed to sexually molest somebody else. But the fact that you're saying through treatment and through understanding your own hurt and the things that you've been through, you were able to learn about yourself. And that's the same thing that a lot of these individuals are going through. But it's crazy when you run into a client and they can tell you about the whole psychology web, because they've been doing it for 15 years. They've been doing it for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's not right. You know, it comes to a point where it's like, give this person an opportunity to try to live a life. Maybe not in society that you want, but just give them an opportunity to live a life. You know, and I think everybody deserves that.
I agree. Was that the 5 minute?
Yeah.
5 minute?
Yeah.
Okay, so one last thing here before we kind of wrap it up, is what can people do if this is something that they feel passionately about? What is something they can do to make a difference?
First off, what I would like to do, or what I would like them to do, is what you did. And that's being able to be open and transparent. And if you have a personal experience with this, it makes it a lot easier to talk about when you are open and you're willing to talk about it, because you'll be surprised how people hide behind their own personal masks. So just talking about it, spreading more awareness and being transparent and not guarded. Don't be afraid. You know, you've been a victim, and it's okay. You know, now that you're an adult, it might not feel comfortable with the victim mentality, but it comes to a point where we've all been some kind of victimized, and the more you talk about it, it makes it a little bit easier. So I would say, if you've been a victim, or if you know anyone that's been a victim, give them an opportunity to talk without judgment and just listen to them. Or if you know someone that's an offender, if you know someone that's hurting someone or that's thinking about hurting someone, help them, talk to them, figure it out. Don't just cast them aside, because if you look at it, we all affect each other. So communication is the key, if you ask me.
Beautifully put. Well, that's pretty much going to be our time for this episode tonight. I want to thank you so much, Freddy, on your knowledge and spitting it out there for the people, raw and uncut.
I want to thank you, Derek, for having the testicular fortitude. And I keep leaning into this microphone because I mean what I'm saying. You'll be surprised how many men that have been victimized and don't have the balls to come out and say it. And this, you'll be surprised, maybe someone watching this, and how it might touch them. So I appreciate being part of this, you know.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
thanks. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. Subscribe,
like,
share,
tell your mom, your grandma, your church members, tell everybody, your prison mates, your pen pals.
Tell everybody. All right. Well, we'll catch you next week.
Peace.